His hands are shaking. Not from fear, though there's plenty of that, but from the blows. The scribe watching him has kind eyes, but the guards behind him do not. They've been beating Amenpanufer for 3 days, and now, finally, he's ready to talk. The year is 1110 BC. The place is Thebes, Egypt, and Amenpanufer, a stonemason who helped build tombs for pharaohs, is about to confess to the greatest crime in ancient Egypt: tomb robbery. The scribe dips his reed into ink and waits. Amenpanufer's voice cracks as he begins. We opened their tombs. We found the noble mummy of this king. We collected the gold that we found on the mummy of this god, and his amulets and ornaments which were at his throat, and the coverings in which he rested. We found the king's wife likewise. We collected all that we found on her too. We set fire to their coverings. We took their furniture. The scribe writes faster, because what Amenpanufer doesn't know yet, what he won't understand until it's too late, is that his confession is just confirming what they already knew. A small clay seal, no bigger than a coin, had already told on him. And 3,110 years later, in the British Museum, you can still see both. The confession, written on papyrus, and the seal that caught him. Welcome to Ash and Crown History. I'm about to take you on a journey through 5,000 years of humans trying to protect what they value. We'll watch civilizations rise and fall. We'll meet tomb robbers and emperors, merchants and monks. We'll travel from Egypt to Rome, from China to the Islamic Golden Age, from Japanese castles to modern banks. But it all starts here, in a prison cell in Thebes, with a man whose hands won't stop shaking, and a broken clay seal that remembered everything. Let's go back to the night it all went wrong. It's 1111 BC, a year before Amenpanufer's arrest. The moon is thin as a fingernail, which is exactly what he was waiting for. Amenpanufer stands at the entrance to the Valley of the Kings with 7 other men. All of them are sweating, and not just from the heat. They're craftsmen, stonemasons, plasterers, painters, men who spent their lives building these tombs, which means they know exactly how to break into them. The seal, whispers Kamwasit, the leader. Show me. Amenpanufer holds up his torch. There, across the tomb entrance, a cord is stretched tight and covered with clay. Pressed into that clay is the jackal head of Anubis, god of the dead, and beneath it, hieroglyphs that read, Necropolos seal, year 4 of Pharaoh Ramesses XI. It's beautiful, it's official, and it's a promise. This seal says, no one has entered here since the day we buried the king. Break it, and you've announced your crime to eternity. Kamwasit smiles. Cut it. Here's what you need to understand about Egyptian seals. They weren't locks. They were witnesses. Picture this, you're a tomb architect in 1200 BC. Your job is to hide a fortune in gold, jewels, and furniture inside a hole in a mountain. Then keep it safe for eternity. You can't post guards. Guards need food, water, pay. Guards get old and die. Guards can be bribed. Within a generation, your guards are just a memory. You can't build an impenetrable door. There's no such thing. Given enough time, any door opens. So what do? You build something smarter. You build a system that doesn't stop thieves, it just makes sure everyone knows they were there. The entrance is sealed with a wooden door. Across that door, a cord made of linen is stretched and knotted. While the clay is still wet, The high priest of Anubis presses his seal into it, a unique design that only he possesses. Now the clay hardens. It becomes a snapshot, a photograph, a permanent record that says, "This is how things were on the day we closed this tomb." If you break that seal, you can't put it back. The clay will crack. The pattern will be wrong. And when the inspectors come, and they always come, they'll know. Because here's the genius. Tombs were inspected regularly by royal commissions who walked the necropolis, checked every seal, and recorded which ones were intact. It's not one seal catching you. It's a bureaucracy. Amenpanufer knows all this. He helped build the very system he's about to betray. But he also knows something else. Inspections happen maybe once a year. Maybe less. If he's fast enough, if he can get in, grab the gold, and get out before the next inspection, he might get away with it. He cuts the cord. The clay breaks with a sound like a whispered secret. For a moment all 8 men freeze, as if Anubis himself might hear. Nothing happens. They pull the door open and step into the darkness. Inside, the tomb is exactly what Amenpanufer expected. A corridor angling downward, the walls covered with painted gods who watch with sideways eyes. The air smells like resin and dust and time. But here's what he didn't expect. More seals. Every 20 feet, another door, another cord, another clay seal. "They're testing us," Kamwasit mutters, "seeing how far we'll go." Amenpanufer understands. Each seal they break is another piece of evidence, another crack in their alibi. But they've come this far. They keep breaking seals. By the time they reach the burial chamber, they've broken 7. And every single one of them has been recorded in clay. A permanent testimony. A chorus of witnesses singing the same song. Someone was here. Someone broke the promise. Inside the burial chamber, the torchlight trembles against gold. The pharaoh's mummy lies in a nested set of coffins, each one more elaborate than the last. Golden amulets cover his chest, lapis lazuli scarabs, carnelian pendants, a fortune compressed into the shape of a man. Amenpanufer has never seen this much wealth in one place. His hands move without thinking, pulling gold from the mummy's wrappings, prying gems from their settings. They work for 3 hours, fill bags with everything portable, set fire to the mummy wrappings to make the gold easier to extract. When they finally climb back out of the tomb, the eastern sky is going gray. They've done it. They're rich. And they've left 7 broken seals behind them, each one a perfect record of their crime. 6 months pass. Amenpanufer uses his share of the gold carefully. Not too much at once. A new tool here. Better food there. Nothing that would make his neighbors suspicious. He's starting to think he got away with it. Then the inspectors come. The tomb robbery papyri, the actual court documents from these trials, still exist. You can read them today in the British Museum and the Egyptian Museum in Turin. They are some of the most detailed criminal records from the ancient world. And they tell us exactly how Amenpanufer got caught. The inspection commission was led by Passer, the mayor of eastern Thebes, a bureaucrat who took his job very seriously, maybe too seriously. He walked the Valley of the Kings with a scribe, a team of guards, and a very specific checklist, which tombs should have intact seals and what those seals should look like. When he reached the tomb Amenpanufer had robbed, he stopped. The door was closed. To a casual observer, everything looked fine. But Passer bent down and looked at the seal. It was cracked. Not obviously broken, but cracked. The kind of crack that happens when you cut a cord and try to close the door again, hoping no one will notice. Passer's scribe made a note. Seal compromised. Tomb of pharaoh name lost shows evidence of entry. They opened the door. Inside, the destruction was total. Mummy wrappings burned. Coffins pried open. Walls scratched where someone had tried to pry out inlaid stones. And every single interior seal was broken. 7 seals. 7 witnesses. All singing the same song. The investigation began immediately. And it was more sophisticated than you might think. The inspectors did something clever. They looked at which seals were broken and which weren't. That told them the robbery happened after the most recent official opening but before this inspection. That narrowed the timeline to about 18 months. Then they looked at who had access. Tomb workers, necropolis guards, priests. Then they did something even smarter. They looked at the local economy. Suddenly, over the past 6 months, several tomb workers had been spending more than they should. New tools, better houses. One guy bought a donkey. The net tightened. When they arrested Amenpanufer and his accomplices, they didn't need confessions to know they were guilty. The seals had already testified. But they tortured them anyway. Because in ancient Egypt, a confession wasn't just about guilt. It was about creating a document, a record, another kind of seal. Amenpanufer confessed everything. The scribe wrote it all down. And that papyrus joined the broken seals as evidence. 2 kinds of witnesses. One made of clay. One made of words. Both permanent. Amenpanufer and his accomplices were executed. Probably by impalement, the traditional punishment for tomb robbery. But here's the thing that should make your skin crawl. Amenpanufer wasn't unusual. The tomb robbery papyri record dozens of cases just like his. And those are just the ones who got caught. The tombs of the Valley of the Kings were looted repeatedly, systematically, often within a generation of being sealed. So did the seals fail? No. They did exactly what they were designed to do. They didn't stop robberies. They created records. And those records, 3,000 years later, let us reconstruct crimes in detail that would make a modern forensic investigator jealous. The clay remembered. And memory, it turns out, is more powerful than any lock. Now let's talk about why this matters. Because the Egyptian seal isn't just a historical curiosity. It's a philosophy of security that every civilization afterward had to grapple with. Protection is not a single invention performing a miracle. It is patience stacked on patience. Let me show you what I mean. You're standing in the same Valley of the Kings, but we're going deeper than Amenpanufer ever did. We're going to a tomb that wasn't robbed. The tomb of Tutankhamun, found intact in 1922. Howard Carter, the archaeologist who discovered it, had to break 16 seals to reach the burial chamber. 16 witnesses. But seals were just the beginning. The Egyptians understood something profound. You can't stop a determined thief with a single barrier. So you stack them. The entrance corridor angles downward, then turns sharply. Why? Because it forces thieves to carry their loot around corners. Heavy objects, golden chariots, stone sarcophagi, become nearly impossible to maneuver. Then, fill shafts. Vertical drops hidden in the floor, designed to catch anyone who doesn't know they're there. Some are empty, just to waste a thief's time climbing down and back up. Some are filled with debris, to exhaust him with pointless labor. Then false walls, plaster painted to look like solid rock. Behind them, the real chambers. A thief might break through the first wall, find an empty room, and assume he's in the wrong tomb. Then, nested doors. 3, 4, sometimes 5 doors, each one sealed independently. Break one seal and you're not done. You've got 4 more to go. Each one another piece of evidence. Another witness saying, "He was here." By the time you reach the burial chamber, you've left a trail of broken promises so obvious that even decades later, inspectors will know exactly what you did and roughly when you did it. This is genius, not because it's impossible to rob, but because it makes robbery loud. Think of it this way: modern alarm systems don't physically stop burglars. They just make noise. They alert authorities. They create evidence. The Egyptians built the same system 3,000 years earlier, using clay instead of electronics. Now follow me out of Egypt, across the Mediterranean, to a city buried in volcanic ash. It's August 24th, 79 CE. Pompeii, a thriving Roman port city. And in exactly 6 hours, Mount Vesuvius is going to erupt and bury everything under 20 feet of pumice and ash. But right now, at this exact moment, a shopkeeper named Visonius Primus is closing his shop for the evening. He slides wooden shutters across the storefront, drops a heavy wooden bar into iron brackets. Then, and this is the part that changes everything, he takes a small bronze padlock from his belt, threads it through a hasp and snaps it shut. Click. That sound. That tiny metallic click. That's the sound of a revolution. Because unlike Egyptian seals, unlike wooden bars, unlike every security device before it, this lock is portable. It doesn't belong to the building. It belongs to Visonius. When he leaves, the lock goes with him. When he returns tomorrow, he'll bring it back. Protection has just become personal property. The lock is small enough to fit in his palm. The key looks like a question mark made of bronze, with teeth along one edge. Inside the lock, a spring-loaded bolt holds the shackle closed. Only Visonius's key, with its specific pattern of teeth, can push the bolt back and release it. We know all this because when Vesuvius erupted 6 hours later, it buried Visonius's shop, his lock, and thousands of others just like it. And when archaeologists excavated Pompeii in the 18th century, they found a city frozen in time, including over 100 bronze padlocks, still locked, still protecting shops that no longer existed. Roman locks were everywhere. Shops, houses, strongboxes, doors, gates. They came in dozens of designs, from simple pin tumbler locks, basically the same mechanism as a modern key lock, to elaborate warded locks with keys that look like medieval art. But here's what makes them brilliant. They democratized security. In Egypt, protection was institutional. The state sealed tombs. The priesthood conducted inspections. The bureaucracy kept records. If you weren't part of that system, you couldn't access it. In Rome, anyone with a few coins could buy a lock. A merchant could protect his shop. A homeowner could protect his valuables. A traveler could lock his luggage. Security became something you could carry with you. But the Romans understood something else that the Egyptians knew. Locks alone aren't enough. Walk with me through a Roman neighborhood at night. Pompeii before the eruption. The streets are dark except for oil lamps flickering in doorways. You hear a bell. Not a church bell. A small bronze bell strung above a shop entrance on a copper wire. Someone just pushed the door, and the bell rang. It's not loud, but it's loud enough. In a city where walls are shared and arguments travel through windows, being announced is almost as bad as being caught. That bell is the same philosophy as an Egyptian seal. It doesn't stop entry. It witnesses it. Now you hear footsteps, boots on stone. A patrol of vigiles, firefighters who doubled as night watchmen, making their rounds. They carry buckets and poles and clubs. They're watching for fires, which were common in a city of wood and oil lamps. But they're also watching for thieves. Not because they're police, Rome didn't really have police, but because fire and theft both destroy communities. You nod to them as they pass. They nod back. Everyone knows who belongs here. A stranger would be noticed, questioned, remembered. This is security as social fabric. Not devices, people. And when devices and people work together, something interesting happens. Let's say someone does break into Visonius's shop. They pry the shutters, snap the lock, get inside. What do they take? Amphorae, clay jars filled with wine or oil or grain. Heavy, awkward. And here's the brilliant part, marked. Pick up a Roman amphora and look at its shoulder. You'll see stamps pressed into the wet clay before firing. A workshop symbol, a date, sometimes a region. Then, after firing, merchants would scratch their own marks into the glaze. Proof of ownership. If you steal that amphora and try to sell it 3 towns over, someone might recognize the mark. Hey, that's Visonius's mark. How did you get his wine? Suddenly you're not just a thief. You're a thief with evidence clinging to your stolen goods. This is the same principle as the Egyptian seal, but mobile. The object itself testifies to its origin. Now let's take this one step further. You're a Roman tax collector. You're transporting 500 amphorae of olive oil from Hispania, Spain, to Rome. That's a fortune. And you've got to move it across 1,000 miles of roads, through ports and warehouses, past dozens of people who could skim a jar or two. How do you protect it? Seals. Not Egyptian-style clay seals on tombs. These are lead seals on cork stoppers. Tiny, but unmistakable. Before the amphora leaves Hispania, the shipper ties a cork into the mouth with string. While the string is wet, he clamps a lead seal over the knot. The seal bears his personal mark. Let's say a dolphin. When the amphora arrives in Rome, you check the seal. If it's intact, the oil is assumed untampered. If it's broken or missing, someone along the chain is going to answer questions. The seal doesn't lock anything. It doesn't physically prevent opening the jar, but it creates accountability. The system is the lock. The seal is just the witness. And this is what the Romans perfected. Layered security that creates so many witnesses, so much documentation, that theft becomes complicated enough to not be worth the risk. But if you think the Romans were sophisticated, wait until you see what was happening on the other side of the world. You're kneeling in front of a small wooden box in the Forbidden City, Beijing. The year is 1425. The Ming Dynasty. The box is lacquered red and gold, beautiful enough to be art. But it's not art. It's a lock. There's no keyhole. At least not one you can see. Instead, The lid has a series of sliding panels, each one hiding another panel beneath. You have to move them in the correct sequence. Left, then right, then press down, then lift before the final panel reveals the actual mechanism. Even then, you're not done. The mechanism itself is a series of rotating discs with characters carved into them. Align the characters correctly, and the bolt releases. Get it wrong, and a spring-loaded pin jams the whole mechanism. Now you can't open it at all without breaking the box. This is a Chinese puzzle box lock. And it's not designed to keep people out through strength. It's designed to keep them out through complexity. The difference is philosophical. Western locks tend to be binary. You have the key or you don't. Force is met with force. Try to pick a Roman lock and you're fighting springs and pins. Chinese locks are often sequential. You need to know the pattern. Force is met with misdirection. Try to force a puzzle lock and you'll break it, but you still won't get it open. Both work. But they reveal different ideas about what security means. Let me show you another example. You're standing in a government archive during the Tang Dynasty, 800 CE. In front of you is a small bronze token, broken cleanly in half. One half is kept here. The other half is carried by a messenger traveling to a provincial governor, bearing orders from the emperor. The token's edge isn't smooth. It's jagged, irregular, like a lightning bolt frozen in metal. When the two halves are brought together, that jagged edge matches perfectly, a fit so precise that no forgery could replicate it. The messenger arrives at the governor's palace. He announces himself and presents his half of the token. The governor retrieves his half from a locked chest. They place the halves together. Perfect match. The order is genuine. This is a tiger tally, fu, and it's one of the most elegant security devices ever invented. It doesn't lock anything. It doesn't seal anything. It just proves identity through physics. You can't fake the jagged edge. You can cast a new token, but you can't make it match the break of the original. The randomness of the fracture is the security. This same principle shows up across Chinese history. Split bamboo tallies. Split wooden seals. Even contracts written on a single piece of silk, then torn in half with each party keeping one piece. When you want to prove the contract is real, you bring the halves together. The torn edges tell the truth. It's brilliant because it's unforgeable. Not because of craftsmanship, but because of entropy. Randomness is harder to copy than precision. Now, let's talk about something even more sophisticated. You're a merchant in Hangzhou during the Song Dynasty, 1150 CE. You're preparing to send a shipment of silk to a buyer in Kaifeng, 600 miles north. You're using a letter of credit, basically a paper promise that says, pay this merchant when he arrives. But how does the buyer know the letter is real? Paper, after all, can be forged. Anyone with ink and a brush could write, pay this man 10,000 strings of cash. So you do two things. First, the paper itself is special. It's made with fibers that glow slightly when held to lamplight, an early watermark. The government controls the mills that make this paper. It's difficult to obtain, expensive to produce, and distinctive enough that anyone handling money regularly knows what it should look like. Second, you seal it. Not with wax like Europeans will do centuries later, but with a carved stone seal pressed into red ink paste. The seal bears your name in intricate calligraphy, carved in reverse so that it stamps correctly. Here's the clever part. The seal is carved in a style unique to you. The calligraphy isn't just your name. It's your artistic signature. The way the strokes flow, the balance of the characters, the small imperfections in the carving. All of it is as unique as a fingerprint. When the buyer receives your letter, he examines the seal. If he's done business with you before, he knows what your seal should look like. If he hasn't, he can compare it to a sample you sent previously, or to a registry of merchant seals kept by the local guild. Forgery isn't impossible, but it's hard enough that most thieves won't bother, especially when there are easier targets. This is another form of the same principle. Make the proof easier to verify than to fake. The Song dynasty took this so far that they invented the world's first paper money. And the security features on those early banknotes? Multiple colors of ink, each requiring a different printing block. Woodblock prints so fine that reproducing them required master craftsmen. And seals. Lots of seals. The government didn't trust a single security feature. They stacked them, layer on layer, until counterfeiting became a full-time job that wasn't worth the risk. But if you think Chinese locks were sophisticated, let's go to Japan and talk about floors that sing. You're walking barefoot through Nijo Castle in Kyoto. The year is 1603. The Tokugawa shogunate has just taken power. And you're about to step on one of the most elegant security devices ever invented. The floor chirps, not loudly, but distinctly, a sound like a bird, a nightingale specifically. You freeze. Look down. The floorboard you just stepped on is moving slightly, and from beneath it comes that soft, high-pitched squeak. This is a nightingale floor, Oguswari, and it's not an accident. It's architecture as alarm system. Here's how it works. Underneath the visible floorboards, carpenters have installed a framework of beams and clamps. The floorboards rest on metal brackets that deliberately rub against the nails when weight is applied. The friction creates sound. A very specific sound. High-pitched, musical, impossible to silence. You can't tiptoe across a nightingale floor. The lighter your step, the more the board flexes, the more friction, the more sound. You can't walk slowly and carefully. That just makes the squeak longer. You can't oil the mechanism because it's hidden under boards you'd have to pry up, which would make even more noise. The only way to cross a nightingale floor is to do it normally, announce yourself, and trust that you're supposed to be there. This is security through inevitability. You will make noise. Accept it. And here's the brilliant part. The nightingale floor isn't in the entrance. It's in the corridor leading to the shogun's private quarters. By the time you reach it, you're already inside the castle. You've already passed guards and gates and checkpoints. But now, in the quiet of the inner palace, where a sleeping shogun might not hear a door open or a footstep on stone, now the floor sings. A guard dozing in the next room will hear it. A servant passing by will hear it. And most importantly, you, the intruder, will know you've been heard. The psychological effect is devastating. Many attempted assassinations in Japanese castles failed not because the assassin was caught, but because the assassin panicked when the floor squeaked and fled before completing the job. The floor didn't stop the attack. It just made the attacker aware he'd been detected. And awareness is its own kind of barrier. But the Japanese didn't stop with singing floors. Let me show you something even more elegant. You're holding a small wooden box, intricately inlaid with geometric patterns. It's a personal safe, the kind a merchant might use to store coins or documents. There's no visible lock, no keyhole, just patterns. You press one corner of the pattern. Nothing. You press another. Nothing. You press a third, and a panel slides slightly to the left. Now a fourth panel is accessible. You press that and it slides down. Now a fifth. You have to press 7 specific panels in the correct sequence before the box opens. And if you press the wrong panel at any point, a hidden catch resets the mechanism. You have to start over. This is a trick box, and while similar devices existed in China and the Middle East, the Japanese perfected them to an art form. The security isn't in strength. The box is wood. You could smash it with a hammer. But if you do, you destroy the contents. If you're stealing documents or silk or tea, things that can be damaged, brute force defeats the purpose. The security is in patience. How long are you willing to fumble with this box before giving up and finding an easier target? And here's the deeper point. Many of these boxes were designed to be solvable eventually, even by someone who didn't know the sequence, because they weren't meant to keep out determined experts. They were meant to keep out casual thieves and nosy servants. If you're willing to spend an hour pressing panels, you'll figure it out. But most people aren't willing. Most people have easier targets. This is security by friction. Not a wall. Just resistance. Now let me take you to a different kind of security. One that doesn't rely on devices at all. You're standing in a caravanserai, a fortified inn on the Silk Road. The year is 950 CE, the Abbasid Caliphate. You've just arrived with a caravan carrying silk, spices, and dyes from Chang'an to Baghdad. It's a journey of 4,000 miles. It will take 6 months, and you're carrying a fortune. How do you protect it? Not with locks. You can't lock a camel. You can't seal a bale of silk in a way that makes it unusable. Instead, you use something more sophisticated, letters of credit. Here's how it works. Before you leave Chang'an, you deposit your goods with a merchant house. They give you a letter, a certificate that says, "This bearer has deposited 500 bolts of silk. Pay him the equivalent when he arrives." You don't carry the silk. You carry the letter. If bandits rob you, they get a piece of paper they can't use. The letter is only valuable to you because only you know the password that verifies it. When you arrive in Baghdad, you present the letter to the merchant house's partner. He asks you a question only the original merchant would know. What was the color of the seal on the deposit? Or, how many witnesses signed? You answer correctly. He pays you. This is the beginning of banking, and it's security through abstraction. You've separated value from the object. The silk stays safe in a warehouse. The letter travels with you, and the letter is worthless without the knowledge in your head. But letters can be forged. So merchants developed more sophisticated versions. By the 10th century, Islamic merchants were using bills of exchange with multiple security features. Handwriting analysis. Each merchant script was distinctive passwords, known only to sender and receiver physical tokens. A torn piece of cloth, with each party keeping half witnesses. Notaries who registered the transaction, and here's the clever part, reputation. In a network where merchants dealt with each other repeatedly over decades, your reputation was more valuable than any lock. Break trust once, and the entire network would know within months. Letters would circulate. Do not honor bills from name. He has proven untrustworthy. your access to credit would evaporate. Your business would collapse. This is security through community memory. The system is the lock. Trust is the key. And betrayal is the break that everyone can see. Let me show you one more example from the Islamic world, because it's one of my favorites. You're in a treasury in Cordoba 1000 C. In front of you is a wooden stick, about a foot long, with notches carved into it. It looks like a tally, a way of counting. It is, but it's also a receipt, and a contract, and an unforgeable proof of transaction. Here's how it works. A tax collector comes to your village. You owe 20 dinars. You pay him. He takes out a wooden stick and carves 20 notches into it. Then he splits the stick lengthwise with a knife. You keep one half. He keeps the other. When the tax collector returns to the treasury, he presents his half. The treasury keeper matches it against their records. The notches line up perfectly because they were carved before the split. The grain of the wood matches because it was once a single piece. This stick proves the tax collector collected 20 dinars. And your matching half proves you paid them. Neither party can cheat without the other's cooperation. This is a tally stick, and while it's best known from medieval England, versions of it existed across the Islamic world, China, and parts of Africa. The security is elegant. Wood grain is random. You can carve notches into any stick, but you can't make two separate sticks with grain that matches perfectly. The only way to create matching halves is to split one original. Like the Chinese bronze tokens, it's security through entropy. Randomness is unforgeable. And here's the beautiful part. Tally sticks were used in England by the Royal Treasury until 1826. In 1834, when Parliament decided to finally burn the obsolete tallies, they used so many that they accidentally set the Palace of Westminster on fire, destroying most of the building. So, a security device from the medieval Islamic world literally burned down the British Parliament. There's poetry in that. Now, if you're still with me, if the idea that a piece of wood or a clay seal or a singing floor can tell us something profound about trust and proof in human nature, then this is your moment. Subscribe to Ash and Crown History, because we're not done. We've covered 3,000 years, but we're only halfway through the story. And what comes next connects everything you've just learned to the phone in your pocket. Hit that button. Join us. Let's keep walking these corridors together. Now let's talk about what happens when all these systems fail. Because they do. And the way they fail tells us something important. You're back in Thebes, Egypt. It's 1108 BCE, 2 years after Amenpanufer's execution. The tomb he robbed is sealed again. New seals, new inspectors, new promises. Within 5 years, it's robbed again. By different thieves using the exact same method. Cut the seal, grab the gold, hope you don't get caught. This happens over and over. The Valley of the Kings is systematically looted over the next century. Almost every tomb. Almost every pharaoh. So did the seals fail? From one perspective, yes. They didn't prevent robbery. But from another perspective, they succeeded perfectly. They created records. They caught many thieves. They forced robbers to work in secret, quickly, scared. And 3,000 years later, we know exactly what happened, who did it, and how. Because the seals remembered even when the guards forgot. This is the paradox of security. Perfect protection is impossible. But imperfect protection is incredibly valuable. A lock doesn't have to be unpickable. It just has to be more annoying than the next target. A seal doesn't have to stop everyone. It just has to stop enough people that society functions. A nightingale floor doesn't have to catch every assassin. It just has to make assassination difficult enough that most people choose different careers. The goal is not perfection. The goal is friction. And when you stack friction on top of friction, a seal plus a lock plus a guard plus a record plus a reputation system plus community oversight, you get something surprisingly robust. Not unbreakable, but resilient. Now let me show you how these ancient principles connect to your life right now. You're at an ATM. You insert your card. Enter your PIN. The machine whirs and gives you cash. Simple, right? But think about what just happened in terms of ancient security. The card is a token, like a Chinese bronze tiger tally. It's a physical object that represents your identity. The chip in the card contains information that matches information in a database. Bring them together, and the match proves you are who you say you are. The PIN is a password. Like a merchant's secret question on the Silk Road, it's knowledge only you should have. Even if someone steals your card, they can't use it without the PIN. The camera above the ATM is a witness. Like an Egyptian seal, it doesn't stop robbery, but it creates a record. Rob this ATM, and your face is recorded. You've announced your crime. The transaction creates a digital paper trail. Like a Roman merchant's marked amphora, every movement of money is logged, tracked, associated with specific accounts. Steal money, and the trail will point to you. The bank's fraud detection system looks for patterns, like Islamic merchant networks that shared information about untrustworthy traders. The system flags unusual activity and alerts human reviewers. None of these features alone would stop a determined thief. But together they create a system where theft is complicated, risky, and likely to be caught. It's the same philosophy as an Egyptian tomb. Layers, witnesses, records, community. The Egyptians would understand your ATM perfectly. Or take your phone. Right now. The one in your pocket. It's locked, probably with a PIN or fingerprint or face recognition. That's a physical key, just smaller than Visonius's bronze padlock. Your apps require passwords. That's the same as the merchant's secret question. Your phone logs your location, your searches, your communications. That's the same as the tally stick that creates a record both parties can verify. If your phone is stolen, you can remotely wipe it or track it. That's the same principle as the bill of exchange, separating value, your data, from the object, the phone. Two-factor authentication, where you need both your password and a code sent to your phone, is the same as the Chinese split token. You need both halves to prove identity. Encryption is like the Japanese puzzle box. The information is there, but you need to know the sequence, the encryption key, to access it. None of this is new. We've just made it faster, smaller, and more convenient. But the principles? Those are 5,000 years old. And the failures? Those are the same too. The weakest link in ancient security wasn't the devices. It was the humans. Amenpanufer didn't pick a lock or crack a seal through skill. He just cut a cord and hoped no one would notice. The nightingale floor doesn't help if the guard is asleep or bribed. The tally stick doesn't work if both parties agree to lie. The merchant reputation network collapses if everyone's willing to cheat. Today, the same problems persist. Phishing emails don't break encryption. They just trick you into giving away your password. Social engineering doesn't crack the ATM. It tricks the human into revealing their PIN. The device is usually fine. The human is the vulnerability. This is why ancient systems didn't just build locks. They built cultures. Egyptian tomb workers swore oaths to the gods. The penalty for tomb robbery wasn't just execution. It was damnation. Chinese officials were rotated regularly to prevent them from building relationships that could lead to corruption. Islamic merchants were embedded in communities where reputation mattered more than profit. Japanese castles had nightingale floors not just to detect intruders, but to remind insiders that they were always being listened to. The device supports the culture. The culture supports the device. When one breaks down, the other fails. This is the real lesson from 5,000 years of security. It's not about building a better lock. It's about building a better system. And systems are made of people, habits, incentives, and trust. You can have the best encryption in the world, but if your password is password 123, you're doomed. You can have cameras everywhere, but if no one monitors the footage, they're useless. You can have elaborate audit trails, but if auditors are corrupt, the trail leads nowhere. Security is a practice, not a product. The Egyptians knew this. The Romans knew this. The Chinese, the Islamic merchants, the Japanese shoguns, they all knew this. And we're still learning it. Now let me take you back one last time to Thebes, to the prison where Amenpanufer confessed. The scribe has finished writing. The papyrus is rolled up, sealed with clay, marked with the court's seal. Amenpanufer is taken away. He'll be executed within days. But the papyrus survives. It's stored in an archive, copied, referenced in other trials, used as evidence of a pattern. Tomb robbery is getting worse, more organized. The authorities respond. They increase patrols. They move royal mummies to a secret cache. They start engraving curses directly onto tomb walls. None of it stops the robberies entirely, but it makes them harder, riskier, less profitable, and eventually the robberies slow down. Not because the tombs become unbreakable, but because Egyptian civilization itself is collapsing. The new kingdom is ending. There's no longer a centralized state to maintain the tombs, to conduct inspections, to punish robbers. The system falls apart. And when the system falls apart, the individual devices, the seals, the doors, the curses become meaningless. A seal without an inspection is just clay. A lock without law enforcement is just metal. A nightingale floor without guards is just a squeaky floor. Security is not a thing. It's a relationship between devices and people, between individuals and communities, between the present and the future. When Amenpanufer cut that first seal, he wasn't just breaking clay. He was breaking a promise that connected him to his community, to his profession, to the future. The seal remembered that broken promise for 3,000 years. Today, in the British Museum, you can see Amenpanufer's confession. Papyrus Mayer A it's called. The handwriting is neat, official. You can read his words, his admission, his guilt. And in the Egyptian Museum in Turin, you can see seals from the Valley of the Kings. Broken clay impressions. Witnesses to crimes committed 3,000 years ago. They're still testifying. Walk through any museum with ancient artifacts, and you're walking through a courtroom. Every seal is a witness. Every mark on a jar is testimony. Every split token is evidence. The objects remember when the people are long gone. And that, more than any lock, any key, any clever mechanism, is the point. We build these systems not just to protect our stuff. We build them to be remembered, to leave proof that we existed, that we had values, that some things mattered enough to protect. The Egyptian didn't seal tombs just to protect gold. They sealed them to protect memory, to ensure that the pharaoh's name would survive, that the rituals would be remembered, that the connection between past and future would hold. When Amenpanufer broke those seals, he wasn't just stealing gold. He was stealing memory, breaking continuity. And the seals, those small, fragile circles of clay, fought back. They remembered. They testified. They reached across 3 millennia and told us what happened. That's power that no lock can match. So tonight, when you turn your key or enter your password or hear the beep of your car locking, think about what you're really doing. You're not just securing an object. You're participating in a 5,000-year-old conversation about trust and proof and memory. You're saying, this matters. This is mine. This is worth protecting. And somewhere in the future, someone might find the record of that, a log file, a database entry, a photograph, and know that you existed, that you cared about something, that you were part of the long chain of humans who believed some things are worth keeping. The seal says, I am watching. The lock says, prove you belong. The witness says, I will remember. And together, across centuries and continents and civilizations, they say, you are not alone. Others before you have tried to protect what they valued. Here is how they did it. Here is what worked. Here is what failed. Learn, adapt, continue. We've walked through Egypt and Rome and China and the Islamic world and Japan. We've seen clay and bronze and wood and paper. We've met tomb robbers and merchants and shoguns and scribes. And they've all taught us the same lesson. Security is memory. Protection is continuity, and the devices we build are just vessels for the trust we hope will last. If this journey meant something to you, if you felt the weight of history in a broken seal or heard the song of a nightingale floor, then join us. Subscribe to Ash and Crown History. Share this with someone who checks the lock twice before bed. Comment with the ancient security system you'd trust with your own treasure. Because the story isn't over. Next time, we're going even deeper. We're talking about the codes that won wars, the ciphers that toppled kingdoms, and the one message that stayed secret for 400 years. Until someone finally cracked it. And what they found inside changed everything. The corridors are still waiting. The seals are still watching, and the past is still speaking, if you know how to listen. Thanks for walking with us. See you in the next one.